season and a new coach, but the same old story for the Tigers as season 2010 got underway at the MCG. And the Blues faithful didn't have to wait long to find their new forward target. Gary Ablett maintained his form from last year, 37 disposals and total domination over the Bombers. The Saints certainly weren't holding back. Welcome back to footy time. And the same could be said for the coach of the Swans. Whatever happened to Mr. Cool? The Fev Brown show got underway in Brisbane, and even though it was his 350th game, for once Jono wasn't smiling as the Doggies' pre-season bubble burst in spectacular style. And who would have guessed the World Soccer Cup was to come?
Oh, that's just super.
It wasn't necessarily a warm welcome against his old team, but for once, Fev let his footy do the talking.
Everything I say is stupid, so I might as well keep my mouth shut.
But it was Big John Brown who had the last word, kicking 7 against the Blues. It was heartbreak for the Demons as they couldn't quite grab a win against the Pies.
That's heartbreaking.
A hapless North Melbourne didn't kick their first major until the 18th minute of the second quarter, whilst over in the West, Treaders enjoyed his 250th with a close win over the Eagles. Even though the skipper was run over during the week, the Dogs still overran the Tigers. After a week of controversy, the Bombers found it hard to convert at the Lloyd, Lockett or even Coventry end, giving Freo its first win against Essendon in Melbourne since 1998. For the Swans, it was their first win in Adelaide since 2001. Easter Monday and an arm wrestle of biblical proportions between heavyweights Geelong and Hawthorn. The Cats only taking the lead with 10 minutes to go, which didn't make Jeff too happy. Ruse hamstring tore and Mick let rip in Friday night's passionate encounter between the Saints and the wayward Pies. North bounced back to form with Boomer Harvey picking up 44 possessions and kicking the point of the century. Another week and another dominant performance by the Lions' two-pronged attack. Essendon maintained their recent dominance over the Blues, much to the coach's delight. After heartbreak the week before, Melbourne scored a gutsy come-from-behind win. Was it crisis time at Adelaide? It was a match of the heavy hits as two of September's contenders left nothing in the change rooms. Cyril was everywhere, and after a dominant pre-season, finally a big haul from the Bulldogs' new gun forward. The superstars came out to play in Perth. Ablett with 33 touches and 4 goals, Pavlich 26 and 5, leading Freo to their best ever start to a season. Nick Nat gave Paddy and David Hill a whack as the Eagles' latest Colt hero dominated in the ruck and at ground level. While Sydney's Jesse White's matchday highlight was up in the stratosphere. Crisis time at Adelaide? You betcha, as the Crows lost their 4th in a row. Collingwood small forwards were on song as the Pies notched up their first win against the Hawks since 2006. Brisbane had a stirring come-from-behind victory, but maybe their fans should have been more concerned with what was coming from in front of them. Melbourne President Jim Stynes was out of hospital to witness his team's 2nd win in a row over the struggling Tigers. Geelong's first home game of the season produced complete domination, an 11-goal third quarter the highlight. And no revolt, no problem, as Goddard filled the void with 5 goals against an impressive Fremantle. Another round and another loss to the Crows, this time to the resurgent Bulldogs. Not the traditional close finish between these teams. The Swans trounced the Eagles for their best start to a season in 12 years. New recruit Daniel Bradshaw kicking 6 for the visitors. Jack Trengove and the youngsters inspired the D's to the round's first upset win over the undefeated Lions. And even Milne's brilliance couldn't stop the round's second surprise result. Roden was in and under everywhere, while Tredrea was just letting it all hang out. Big crowd, big event, big venue, but a big fizzer, as a 7-goal first quarter to the Pies meant there was never a chance for the Bombers. The Hawks had little option but to throw Roughhead into the ruck, but even he couldn't get them over the line against the Roos in a tight finish in Tassie. Richmond kicked the first 5 goals of the game, and it looked like another upset was on the cards, but Freo settled to run out comfortable winners. Ablett picked up 33 touches, but it wasn't enough as Carlton's live wire forward line made Geelong look flat-footed in the last upset of the round. The D's bubble was burst by the Roos, ending a 3-game winning streak. It was showdown time in the city of churches, but it was another letdown by the Crows as their crosstown rivals came from behind to score a stirring victory. But he was the only beacon of hope in an otherwise bleak night for the Hawks. Watson led from the front for the winners, while Slattery forced a controversial behind. Jude was wearing wobbly boots, while Daniel Bradshaw donned the super boot as he led the Swans to victory over his old side.
This will be a lesson for young kids at home. He's got onto it. It's going. It's going.
J-Pod kicked another 5 as the Cats trounced the Tigers. Another round, another big event game for the Pies, this time against the Blues. Swan and Judd were standouts with 31 and 37 possessions respectively, which did cause some confusion. But with 39 possessions, there was no confusion as to why Tom Scully was the #1 draft choice. Thought surprised the Dons that Eddie had, which had Choco smiling. But even after continued good form and a dominant display against the Roos, some coaches are hard to please.
I didn't think today's game was exceptional.
Roughhead kicked 6 goals, 3, but the Hawks still lost their 6th in a row. After 15 years, Freo broke its Gabba hoodoo. Geelong brought Sydney back to earth with a thud, with Shane Mumford doing the same to his old teammate. It was a chance for either team to go from none to 1 win. The Crows comfortable victors in the end. Monday night football was popular with the fans as the pace of the Blues upset the favoured Saints. After a dream start to the season, Fremantle was given a rude awakening by a dominant Collingwood outfit led by Travis Cloke with 5 goals. Big Baz came up against his old teammates in Canberra. The Dogs too good for the Swans.
To pieces.
The Eagles managed their first win at the MCG in 3 years. It was a masterclass at the Gabba, the usual suspects leading the way for the Premiers. The Crows came barnstorming home with 7 last-quarter goals, but it still wasn't enough. The Kangaroos holding on by 9 points. Sean Burgoyne finally made his debut for Hawthorn as they just held on to win against an improving Richmond. It was 4 wins in 5 as the Blues won a tight contest against the Power. And St Kilda's slip in form continued against a spirited Essendon. When are you back, Nick? For the second week in a row, Collingwood were looking to defend top spot on the AFL ladder. But in front of 88,000, the Pies were brought down a run in a second-half blitz by the all-conquering Cats. The Dogs had a stranglehold on the game from the very start and went on to win comfortably in a spiteful one against the Roos.
Well, I mean, if you had 3 blokes coming at you, what are you supposed to do? Actually cop it?
It wasn't always pretty, but Pavlich and Hazelby led the Dockers to an SCG victory, their first in 14 years. It was dream time at the G, but even with Revolt making his presence felt, Richmond's nightmare season continued at the hands of Essendon. At the top end, Melbourne just managed to end on top in hot and humid conditions. Win 2 for the struggling Crows against an out-of-form Lions. Buddy fired and unsociable football was back as Hawthorn accounted for a disappointing Carlton. And Lenny Hayes inspired the Saints to their first win in 3 weeks.